Hello, I'm Brenna Bay, a partner here with Edwin Co. Welcome to our podcast series about residential construction. In these podcasts, we discuss matters which arise on residential construction projects. Numerous of the topics discussed in these podcasts are also covered in our guide entitled What to Know Before You Start Digging a Hole, which can be found on our website. I would highlight that the information within these podcasts is general guidance only and may not necessarily apply to your particular situation, since every construction project is different. Therefore, I strongly recommend that you seek professional advice before you undertake any sort of construction project or sign any appointments or contracts. In our previous podcasts, we've discussed topics including forms of appointment and contract, collateral warranties, and the insurance required when undertaking your residential construction projects. In this podcast, I want to discuss exactly when it is during your project that you should engage a construction lawyer. So, you've decided you want to build your dream home. You have, of course, undertaken lots of research, engaged an architect to help with the designs, and sought planning permission. Either the architect, or maybe a friend, has recommended a builder, or you have hired a quantity surveyor to help undertake a tendering process in order to select a contractor. The contractor has given you a price, and you are ready to let the wrecking ball swing. Now is the time to find a lawyer, right? Often parties leave the legal stuff as long as possible, as everyone is keen to start on site, and, well, let's face it, most people see lawyers as an unnecessary expense. However, by engaging a solicitor at the outset of your project, more often than not, you actually save both time and money, since, just like all of the other construction professionals, a construction lawyer has specialist knowledge which informs the project. Let me give you some examples of the types of matters which are often overlooked until a lawyer gets involved. A very important and key issue that I've come across on a few projects now is that clients are not being advised about the need for a latent defects policy, otherwise known as a new build warranty. As we learnt in podcast 6, to be mortgageable, a newly built home requires latent defects insurance. Without a latent defects policy, your new property is likely unsellable for 10 years following completion. If a project starts without a latent defects policy being in place, not only can it be difficult to obtain a policy once the works have commenced, the premium which we will have to pay for any such insurance will be much higher than if the policy had been obtained at the outset of the project. Another matter which must be discussed from the outset is liability for design risk. Residential employers often do not have a full design team. Rather, you might appoint an architect to provide some initial drawings for planning. However, you are relying on the contractor to fully design and build your new home. In such situations, and especially if you have a funder, it is typically desirable for the contractor to accept sole design responsibility and liability. However, to do so, the contractor must be aware of this requirement from the outset, as the contractor needs to review the documentation, understand the risk, and price for it. With these and various other matters, the issue is that the allocation for risks is not discussed at the outset of the project. Rather, at tender stage, it is stipulated that an industry standard form of contract, such as a JCT design and build, will be used. The contractor prices for the works based on an unamended JCT, and the client is provided with what it believes to be a fixed-priced contract. Since the parties are all keen for the works to commence, the contractor starts on site under a letter of intent drafted either by a member of the professional team or the contractor. It is only after this point that a solicitor is engaged, who then highlights various matters, such as the fact that the costs for the works are not fixed, and that there are numerous risks which the parties need to discuss. Not only do the contract negotiations then become quite protracted, the client's negotiating position is deteriorated because the contractor is already on site. At this point, I want to be very clear on something. Contractors should be properly compensated for the works which they undertake and the risks they accept. The challenge is that most residential construction projects are undertaken by clients who are building a home for the very first time. Even if you undertake lots of research, there will still be various matters of which you will be unaware and questions which you will simply not know to ask. That is why it's important to engage a construction solicitor from the outset of your project. Initially, your solicitor should give you advice about matters to be considered, for example, latent defects insurance, and information which needs to be obtained from or provided to the contractor. It is highly recommended that a draft of the contract with the appropriate amendments is provided at tender stage so that you can understand the costs associated with the contractor accepting various risks in order that you can decide how to proceed. For example, if at tender stage you indicate that you want the contractor to accept the risk for ground conditions, the contractor will price for this, and then you can decide if the amount quoted is acceptable or if you would prefer to accept the cost in the event that a risk arises. Finally, if you decide that you just can't wait and that you want to allow some works to commence under a letter of intent, it is strongly recommended that you seek legal advice, as there are various implications both of letters of intent and of allowing a contractor to commence works before a written contract is in place. So, in this podcast, we've discussed why you should instruct a construction lawyer from the outset of your residential construction project. While it might seem that holding off on engaging a lawyer will save costs, in reality, doing so generally leads to more costs later in the project. Instead, I would encourage you to view your construction solicitor as a member of the project team who brings specialist knowledge to assist you in building your dream home. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast and will join us again next time.